Hello, I am Aviva reporting live in Jerusalem from room 552 for Israel 24/6 TV. Today is Thursday, March the 6th. Shortly after 9 a.m. this morning, the government press office issued the text of the joint press conference held this morning with Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs Ms. Livni and U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. Foreign Minister Livni thanked Secretary Rice and welcomed her to the region. Ms. Livni continued by saying that, of course, the two had a much-needed discussion about the situation in the region. And yes, that discussion included the perspective of the peace process which had been outlined at Annapolis, and also the constant attacks on the sovereign state of Israel from the Gaza Strip. Ms. Livni stated, and I quote, "This kind of complicated situation needs some answers, and the idea is to continue the peace negotiations while giving an answer to Israeli citizens being attacked by Hamas. And this is what the Israeli government is going to do with the help of Secretary Rice," end quote. Secretary Rice confirmed that indeed discussion had just been concluded, and she described those discussions as very good discussions. She elaborated, and I quote, "As I've concluded very good discussions with all of the parties, we've talked about the need to restore calm, and of course that also means to stop the rocket attacks against Israeli citizens. We have talked about the need to return to the path of negotiations." Secretary Rice described the situation of the Hamas rule in the Gaza Strip as one in which the people of Gaza and the two-state solution are both being held hostage by Hamas. Secretary Rice continued without interruption with the following comments, and I quote, "We're working very hard to address the situation, particularly in Gaza. Assistant Secretary Welch is going to Egypt for discussions with the Egyptians about how the situation can be improved, including how to deal with issues that we have been addressing for some time, like the tunnels in which Hamas is using to smuggle goods and weaponry into Gaza. I know too that the Israelis and Egyptians have been in touch. I'm concerned about the need to improve conditions on the ground in the West Bank, and I've urged both sides to live up to their roadmap obligations, and in furtherance of that goal, Lieutenant General Fraser will convene the tripartite committee on roadmap obligations next week. We have to set a date, but I believe it's likely to be on Thursday of next week, at which we will have the first of those trilaterals to deal with roadmap obligations. And we are, of course, concerned about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. The U.S. government has pledged to UNRWA. That pledge has reached $148 million for 2008. I've also talked a lot about the importance of continuing the negotiations, because ultimately the answer to many of these problems has to be given in the solution that Annapolis put forward, which is two states living side by side in peace and security. And to that end, I've been informed by the parties that they intend to resume the negotiations and that they are in contact with one another as to how to bring this about. And so thank you very much for a very good visit here, and I look forward to continuing our discussions, end quote. Secretary Rice also stated during questions from the press that she had spoken with President Abbas, and she stated that he too would like to see calm, including a ceasefire. Concerning the rocket attacks, Secretary Rice stated, and I quote, "As to how calm comes about, I have made clear our view that it ought to be pretty clear how calm comes about. The rocket attacks against Israel ought to stop. And as I've stated, as Israel defends itself, Israel also needs to be very careful about innocent people who get caught in the crossfire, about the humanitarian conditions in Gaza, and so there is a path forward," end quote. And also on the same topic, Foreign Minister Livni stated, well, clearly, since Hamas took control of the Gaza Strip, we adopted a dual strategy. The idea is to work with diplomatic leaders to try and reach a peace treaty with them, while simultaneously working in order to delegitimize Hamas as a terrorist organization and to find an answer to these terror attacks coming from the Gaza Strip to Israel. In facing the threat coming from the Gaza Strip, it is important to understand that Israel left the Gaza Strip. We dismantled settlements. We took our forces out. So it's not part of our ideology to be there, but we need to give an answer to the lives and to security of Israeli citizens who are under daily attack from the Gaza Strip. The problems there are, one, the attacks on Israel, and the other is the buildup of Hamas, which has now begun to be more like a small army and less like a terrorist organization. And they are trying to get more and more weapons coming through Egypt to the Gaza Strip. So we need to address these two problems simultaneously, and this is also what Secretary Rice said about the talks with Egypt. Of course, as was said since the beginning, Israel needs to provide security to its citizens, and we need to provide an answer to terror attacks coming from the Gaza Strip to our cities. This is the reason for the Israeli decision to take military action against Hamas in the Gaza Strip." End quote. And that concludes this section of Fact Not Commentary. I am Aviva Lee, reporting live in sunny Jerusalem from room 552 for Israel 24/6 TV. And thank you to Media Central for the impromptu use of their offices for the broadcast of this show. Please check back for part 2 in this series about this morning's press conference with Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice and Foreign Minister Livni. Thank you, and shalom.